When researching this video, I found out that statistically, young black children from the age of 5 years old are seen as less innocent and more adult-like. But truth be told, I actually didn't need to do further research to find out this point. I have lived and breathed it. There are just so many horrible and detrimental effects of adultifying black youth. Later down the lines, it really affects mental health, job life scenarios, which I'm going to talk about in a much more deeper sense, as well as home life scenarios as well. So stay tuned for this discussion. Okay, before we get started on this deep discussion, some of you guys might be asking yourself, what does adultification actually mean? Well, the actual definition of this is the process or fact of treating or considering a child as if they're an adult, usually in a way that is wrong or harmful. When we talk about the adultification of black youth, gender roles actually play a big part in this, because how young black boys are treated growing up is very much so different to how young black girls are treated growing up. I feel like one of the biggest factors of the adultification of young black girls is that from like a very young age, black girls are kind of seen to be like the mother of the house. They have to make sure that everyone's like taken care of, cooked and cleaned and all of that stuff from like a very young age. I generally don't think it's an older sibling's responsibility to be responsible for their younger sibling, or to have to be like the mother of the household. It actually sounds really gross out loud, but it's a necessary conversation that we have to have. I feel like from a young age, so many young black girls are taught how to cater to men. What I mean by that is like there's so many times where it's like young black girls are kind of taught, okay, this is how you cook, this is how you clean, because you know one day you're going to be a mom, one day you need to know how to clean for yourself, one day you need to know how to like provide for your husband and your family. And it's like, bro, like she's 5, like she's 7, that's not even in, you shouldn't even be seeing a 5-year-old girl and think about them being like a mum. You know something that's very sad about this? So many of the implications of the adultifying of young black girls can actually come from women, from black mums as well. I feel like from like a young age, always teaching like young black girls or young girls in general to always be like catering to men and also to be like the mother of the house from like a young age really upholds like toxic patriarchal standards that like women always have to cater to men. And I feel like when like mums perpetrate that to their daughters, that's like really like an aftermath of like toxic generational conditioning, like conditioning, and these generational curses need to end. They need to end. It's horrible to think about. From like a young age, so many young black girls are seen as women, and on the flip side as well, so many young black boys are seen as men from like a very young age. I'm going to get into that discussion right now. I'm excited to have a further discussion about this later on in this video, but for now I'm going to speak about how when you raise black boys, lots of the time it's like I'm not raising boys, I'm raising men. It's not uncommon in black households for young black boys to not really get sympathy and empathy, and I feel like from like a young age, if a black boy is emotive or sad about something, it's kind of like, come on, man up, come on, be tough about it. Like, you know, we don't really give lots of young black boys grace or empathy or sometimes love and affection, because it's kind of like, you're a man, you got this, man up, chin up. And I genuinely do believe that growing up, every single child deserves like a hug, a kiss before bed, like warmth and affection from both their parents, mum and dad. And I feel like lots of times when we talk about how like kids deserve affection is particularly associated with femininity. So it's like that's the mum's job to be like, you know, affectionate and loving towards the kids, and the dad's job is to be a bit more stern. We're gonna talk about that a bit later on in this video as well. And just so great to think that as like a society and like as a black community, if we see like a picture or a video of like a young black boy like getting like a hug and kiss from his dad, it's automatically seen as like feminine, or like this kid's gonna grow up to be gay or something like that. When it's like, no, maybe this kid is now going to grow up and have such a great relationship with his father that he's going to trust him so much. And hey, the discussion we're going to have about this later in this video, hey, you're not ready. You are not ready. But before we get into that discussion, I really want to talk about the really creepy, weird boy mum epidemic. I feel like if you're on TikTok, you've heard of the term boy mum, but if you haven't, basically a boy mum is basically a mum who's got sons or has got a son. That's it. There's no deeper definition. Remember how I said earlier that sometimes women can actually like uphold the patriarchy and also promote like adultification of like black girls in like a horrible manner? I feel like this is something that can relate to this discussion that we're about to have. I feel like this is how we set up so many girls up for failure, because even before a child is born, so many people are like, I want a son, I want a boy. The girl's kind of just like, like I don't know if I want to have a girl because, you know, she might start on OnlyFans one day. It's kind of like so many people think so negatively of like a baby girl who hasn't even been born yet, mind you. And it's like, like one day I'm gonna have a son, it's like, oh, my son's gonna take care of me, or my son's gonna be like my mini me. It's kind of like we glorify sons, but we don't really glorify daughters even before they're born. Deep down. And I feel like a very harmful stereotype is that even men and women can like perpetrate this, is that so many men and women are like, oh, I want a boy, I want a son, because sons are much more easier to deal with, because like girls are too emotional, they're too dramatic. I don't want to deal with like relationship gossip and drama. I just want like a boy because I know he can take care of himself and I don't really have to do too much. And I generally believe this opens up a question of like internalized sexism and like internalized misogyny, and that can also be deep rooted in like so many like mums have had really bad relationships with their mums. So they're like, I don't actually want to repeat something like that, so let me have boys because that'll just be much more easier to deal with. And here's another thing about the bond between a mum and a son, is that so many sons, and trust me, I know this, I'm like this as well, so many sons literally ride for their mums from like hill to hill, ride for their mums, and literally just want to like protect them and make sure that they're okay and safe. And I feel like one thing that can be like really dangerous about this is that so many mums know how much their sons don't play about them. So let's say mom is having like an issue with like husband, or having an issue with like just something that's going on in like personal life. It's like, oh, I'm now going to lean on my son for emotional stability because I know that they don't play about me. And that can be perpetrated from like such a young age, that so many mums trauma dump on their sons, or like, oh, but you'll never do that to me, you'll never do that to mum, you'll never break my heart like this person has just done. And it's like that can be like information overload and so much pressure from such a young age. So many young boys have to be like the emotional stability of the household. So many young boys have to be like the man of the house if their father is not present, or if their father is like barely present. And that's such a tough decision, and not tough decision, that's such a tough thing to have to deal with from, as I said, such a young age. And I feel like so many times we overlook like the adultification of black boys, because it's kind of like, oh, boys just have to be strong, boys just have to be tough, that's something you just have to deal with like as a man. But it's like, he's not a man, he's 7, you know, he still deserves protection, he still needs someone that he can trauma dump to. The next chapter of this video is probably going to be my favourite chapter that I've spoken about in a very, very long time. And I'm titling it In the Name of a Better Future. Hear me out. Raising kids is no flipping joke. And so many things that you do in like their childhood and their early upbringing, good and bad, can really affect them so much in the long run. So even if you literally got children who are like 2 and 1 month years old, even though they're so young, it's normal for like a parent to think about, okay, what kind of life are they going to live when they're literally 18 plus, 30 plus. Like that's just a normal parental thing to think about. And when you're a black parent, there's so many different and intrinsic thoughts that you have from literally like the youngest of age. I feel like one thing that's common for all parents to think about is like, okay, what kind of life are they going to live? What kind of person are they going to be to society? But now when you're a black parent, it's like, okay, so when do I tell them about racism? What am I going to do if they deal with like racial profiling literally on their way to primary school, to nursery? And like there's so many tough discussions that you have to have or are thinking about from like such a young age for them. And here's the thing about our parents, right? All these discussions that we're having online right now, all discussions that I'm having on my channel, racial discussions, job market, discrimination, all of that stuff, they were having those exact same conversations prior to our birth, prior to our existence, because it was happening then and it was happening now. Unfortunate reality, but it's the truth. And here's to say this as well, it was probably even harder 20 years ago for me, 20 years ago, than how it is right now. Growing up, I always heard the expression that you have to work, hey, that's something I was told from like a young age, you need to work twice as hard as your peers. Always heard that. Because truth be told, my parents had to work twice as hard as their peers. They had to work twice as harder, deal with racial discrimination at the workplace, deal with job discrimination, whole bunch of like other factors as well, just for this house to stay afloat. So for me, I always have to be hard on my books, I need to be hard on my grind, on my educational grind, because that's what's going to get me the best future that I can possibly give myself. I like to believe that we live in a world where all parents want their children to be successful. All parents want their kids to just be like better and bigger than they were. And truth be told, right now I'm not a parent, I don't have a child. Not right now, not for a good couple of years. But I literally love children and I love being around children. I just feel so happy every single time there's like a baby in the family, or if I get like you know, baby cousin or something like that. Like, that just fills my heart with so much joy. And as I've just told you guys, like, I love children, I love being around them. And in my adult life, I've never actually had to ever discipline a child because I don't have a child. So I'm not going to tell off or discipline another person's child because that's not my responsibility. You go to your mom, go to your dad, that's not my responsibility. But now, hey, when you're a parent, like, that child is now actually your responsibility. So now you need to teach them foundations. You actually have to be hard on them and discipline them because that's your responsibility. And because of this and so many things I've just spoken about, so many kids, so many black kids are raised on tough love. And tough love is a very interesting discussion. Tough love is an expression used when someone treats another person harshly or sternly with the intent to help them out in the long run. So for example, let me tell you where someone hit me with the tough love. Who hit me like wolf? It hit me like wolf. Let me tell you this. I was once told in like the earliest stage of my YouTube journey that my YouTube channel, this is just hard to say. This is hard to say. In my earliest stage of doing YouTube, someone told me that my YouTube channel wasn't creative enough and I need to switch things up and that it was boring. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. After said person told me that, I worked my ass off on making sure that my videos were better. I worked my ass off into making sure that I produce better quality videos and put so much more time and effort into my channel. And my channel is doing much better since that person told me that. And here's the thing about tough love. I feel like tough love is effective when you can look back and say, you know what, I'm so happy that that person implemented that. I'm so happy that that person told me the truth in that moment, even though I didn't want to hear it. I'm so glad that that happened because if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here. I feel like that's when you know that tough love is effective because they said something to you with the intent of you being better. And let me tell you this about being raised in like a black African household. One thing that we don't play about is education and like your career in general. That's one thing we don't play about. We can all hate each other in like a huge family, put them babies in school and make sure that they get a good fucking education and career. That's one thing we don't play about at all. And to this day, like, I'm a firm believer of education. I'm a firm believer of hard work and grind and hustle grind culture. And I feel like that kind of did stem from like my childhood. I feel like I even remember Memory Unlocked. I remember my grandfather in Tanzania literally used to send us like resources, like educational books for like me and like my sister to complete and stuff. And it just makes me think like, wow, I've had so many, not even just like with my parents, like so many like family members who are literally like praying and rooting for my success. Oh my gosh. And even though everything that I said sounds so extremely positive, here's how it can get very, very toxic. How perpetrating and wanting like your children to have like the best future can actually lead to so much toxic mental health and so many issues in the long run. Walk with me. We're going to talk about literally one of the most successful black men in human history to ever exist, Mr. Michael Jackson himself, the king of pop himself. Yeah, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson literally needs no introduction. That man is literally the greatest entertainer that the world will ever see. No one has ever sung like Michael. No one has ever danced like Michael. No one has ever acted like Michael. One thing about me, I don't play about Michael Jackson. I'll tell you that. Where's my poster? Hold up. This is my goat. I'm not even... Bye. So, let me be serious. Like, this is literally my favorite artist of all time. And literally, the stats are here. 8 Grammy Awards, 37 weeks at #1 of the charts, biggest selling music video of all time, 10 AMAs, 20 Billboard Awards, and the biggest selling album of all time, Thriller. My favorite album of his is Invincible. The more you know. The more you know. There's a reason why I brought up Michael Jackson, because I truly do believe that his upbringing really resonates to this point that I'm trying to make of this whole section of this video. Michael Jackson was born on the 29th of August 1958 in Gary, Indiana in America. Michael grew up with 8 siblings, so deep this. 9 kids living in one house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and 2 parents. Deep that. And also add to the pressures of his upbringing, in Gary, Indiana in the 50s and 60s in America, there were so many prevalent issues such as racial tension and industrial problems as well as corruption as well. So it really truly was humble beginnings for Michael Jackson and his family. And even though they amounted to so much success, it all could have gone terribly wrong. His upbringing could have gone terribly wrong. And there are 2 people in the world who had to make sure that that didn't happen. His mother and his father. I'm going to say the first person to actually see the vision of just how musically gifted the whole Jackson family actually were was their mother, Katherine Jackson. Long story short, Miss Katherine Jackson was the one who could actually convince their father, Joe Jackson, like, hey, there's really truly something here. this boy Michael can actually sing, Tito knows how to do the guitar. Like, we've got something here. And after Joe Jackson copped on, like, okay, there's actually something here, he worked with his boys day in and day out to make sure that they were the best group that the world has ever seen. In a time of racial injustice, in a time of economic struggles, he pushed and made sure that his kids had a better life than he ever did or ever dreamed of. And it is physically impossible to talk about Michael Jackson and the upbringing of the Jackson 5 and their father without talking about the level of abuse that they had to endure behind the scenes. Joe Jackson told his boys, you guys are going to be the best damn group that the world has ever seen. And the way that he went about it was extremely toxic and detrimental to their well-being in general. In Michael's adult life, in numerous interviews and occasions, he spoke about the level of abuse and mistreatment that he went through his father. For example, when him and his brothers were rehearsing for like the Jackson 5, they've got a show coming up, a tour, whatever it is, Joe Jackson would be watching them performing with a belt in his hand. And I've watched so many interviews where Michael was actually talking about just how horrific his father actually was, even about times where his father had actually grabbed Michael and grabbed one of his brothers and actually like thrown them on the wall. Numerous times that had happened before. And when you're young and you know, okay, that's the kind of treatment that I'm going to get if I mess up, that made them perfectionists at their craft, because it's like, crap, if I miss a step, if I miss a beat, they're going to get a whipping, a beating like crazy. There's so many focal discussions that we can talk about when you think about someone like Joe Jackson. And I feel like Joe Jackson is a prime example of why so many people are in favor of beating your child. Joe Jackson kept his children in line and he kept his children in check. As I mentioned, in a time of racial tension, systematic tension, his oldest children could have been out on the streets selling who knows what, getting themselves in crimes and getting themselves in drugs and, you know, doing a whole bunch of messed up things. That could have been the case for them. Joe Jackson made it certain that if you ever do something like that, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be hell, basically. Raising nine kids is, whoa, 9 kids, that's too much. But raising 9 kids in general in a 2-bedroom house, he made sure, okay, my kids are going to be correct. I'm going to make sure that every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of you guys are going to make sure that you guys are successful, good, flipping people. And look at where it got them. At a time when Michael Jackson and his brothers were literally like 8, 9, 10, 13, whilst lots of their peers, lots of people in their neighborhoods were struggling, they were being flown around America, they were touring, they were charting on the Billboard 100 charts, they were breaking records at a time where so much could have gone wrong for them. Everything was going right. They were living the Black American dream, quite literally. And Michael Jackson is someone's like, his music, his art, his dance, every creative thing about him was perfect. As in, we'll never see a musician, we'll never see an artist quite like him in human history. He was once in a lifetime generational act. And here's a very, very tough question to think about. Lots of Michael Jackson's perfectionism was driven through fear of his father. So if his father was not strong on him, if his father was not so tough on him, would he have been the biggest entertainer that the world has ever seen? I feel like Joe Jackson is someone who's like the peak of like tough love parenting. He is someone where it's like in like the 70s, in the 80s, in a time in America where so much racial prejudice and injustice was so high. Joe Jackson is someone in like a small percentage of people, a very small percentage of people was sleeping comfortably knowing that my 9 kids have got trust funds. My 9 kids are in Hollywood right now. My 9 kids have got security around them. I don't need to worry about them. They're good. At such a young age, he provided so much financial stability and perfectionism and grind hustle culture in all 9 of them. But as I mentioned, we cannot overlook or downplay just how much abuse and mistreatment that all of his siblings had to endure because of their father. Here's the thing about like tough love parenting that's got such a huge detrimental negative effect of it, is that so much of tough love and so much of like tough parenting is driven and pioneered through fear. And fear is such a horrible emotion because it's not a, it's not a long-term emotion that you want to carry with you all the time. Fear is such like a complex emotion where it's like good if you need like a survival instinct. If you're walking home and it's like pitch black and you hear like a creepy noise and you're like, okay, I'm gonna walk this way. Even though it's a bit longer, I heard something there, I'm not going to entertain that. that's when fear can be used in a good way. But when fear is like long term and it feels persistent, or when one person just gives you fear consistently, that's such a horrible thing to have to endure. Even though Michael Jackson and his siblings were so flipping successful, had so much money, had a big old bag, a big old house, they were still living in fear of their father. It doesn't matter just how rich or successful they were, fear was still there and it never went. And even in their adult lives, they still felt fear of their father. Even Michael Jackson even said this in an interview when he was literally in his 40s about times where he knew that his father was going to be around and he literally like vomit or pass out. Even he had to say that like security guards have had to literally hold him up from fainting, from being in just his father's presence alone. That's how bad the abuse was for him. And it's like, even though Michael Jackson's literally one of the most successful people to ever grace this planet, even though he had so much like immense success and money and stardom, there was still a broken heart and there was still an empty void in his heart and his spirit. And that was because of his father. And it's like, okay, because it's like, okay, you don't even have like a relationship with your father, but it's like, oh, but at least you've got these number ones, at least you've got all of these, you got all this award, you got all this money. It gets to a point where like that doesn't fill your heart, it doesn't fill your spirit. But what fills your heart and what fills your spirit is love from your parents, from your family. And he didn't get that from his father, and it still messed with him, it still affected him in his adult life.
And if you miss a step, expect to be,
Do you think your father was too strict?
Yes. No, he's gonna kill me.
I don't think he realized to this day how scared. I mean scared. So scared that I would regurgitate.
And of course, every single parent wants their child to be successful, and especially it's so big in like the black community. It's like, hey, you need to be successful, you need to be on top of your grades. That's not everything that a child needs. That's not everything that a human being needs. You can have success, you can have money, you can have a car, you can have fame, but are you happy though? And I feel like it's so imperative and it's so great for parents to push their children, to motivate their children, to instill values of like hard work and grinding and like making a name and a living for themselves. I think that is great in itself, but I don't think that should be rooted in fear. And I generally believe that like beating your child for not doing something like right or for not getting 100% in like a test is not effective at all. Because with like Michael Jackson, it can get great results, but it's just rooted in fear. And it can really just deeply psychologically mess with them. I'm going to coin this discussion a bit more to you and I. Trigger warning. By show of hands, how many of you guys were beat whilst doing like your homework in like primary school? You know them ones when you're on the table. Yeah. You know them ones when you're on the table doing your maths and you say 5 + 5 is 7, and then you're there. Yeah. This is a discussion that I've had with so many of like my black friends, is that, you know, those like, what's those things, those like home learning, like those like 5-minute frenzy things. Yeah, why was that so stressful? Like, why was that so stressful? Like, I just don't understand how and why a little child who literally like, this is their first time like doing this maths and doing this information, if they say like 7 + 7 is like 20, why are you now slapping them across the face? Why are you now belting them? One of my friends, if they did like something wrong with their math homework, they would have to, can you see my legs? They'll have to do this on the wall. What is that? What is that? That never happened to me, truth be told. But what on God's green earth are we doing here? When I tell you this, so many of my black friends, we have trauma dumped together about beatings and beating culture. Why is it so many of my friends have been beat with like cords and stuff like that, or with like hangers, slippers? And it's like, okay, I know it's kind of like culture, it's kind of like, okay, but that's what happened to me, that's what happened to me, that's what happened to me. Just because it happened to you, just because it's what happened to your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, doesn't mean that it's right. And doesn't mean that it's okay, and doesn't mean that it hasn't psychologically messed up them as well. When I think back at like doing like home learning and doing stuff like that, I hated it. Truth and be told, I hated it. It was scary. It was fear. I didn't feel motivated to get work done. It was like, I have to get work done through fear, because if I get something wrong, I'm truth. You know, sometimes you just have to laugh. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. Sometimes it's just like, oh crappity, Yeah, and I feel like a very overlooked like community in the black community is black neurodivergent people, black people with ADHD, black people with dyslexia. And I feel like if you're learning in an environment like this, for anyone, it is extremely harmful, but especially for black children who have got ADHD, who have got dyslexia. Well, there's like also like a huge stigma in our community where it's like, oh, ADHD just means that you're lazy or just means it's just an excuse. When I generally don't think that's the case. It's like, how can someone who's got learning difficulties, how are they going to thrive in an environment like this? And like, that's just so bad. Like, no child should be on like a table, literally bored out, crying, stressed out, doing math homework. That's not the norm. That's really not the norm. And if they get something wrong, it's okay, because children make mistakes, adults make mistakes. And even in my adult life, yeah, imagine this now, with my adult life. If I make a mistake and then I was telling you guys, oh yeah, now I made a mistake, I'm going to like belt myself or something like that, you guys would be like, Roderick, you're mad. So why are we now beating up children? I'm going to say beating up because some people take it way too far. Why are you guys beating children for getting something wrong, for making a mistake? That doesn't make any sense. And I feel like it really psychologically messes with you. And I can give a bit of glimpse of like me, my personal life, and how that kind of impacted me with my stance on like education. I've had my fair share of beatings in the past, and lots of the times, I can't lie, I look back at it, even in my adult life, and I'm like, that didn't actually need to happen. That didn't really need to happen at all. Growing up, I was always in like top set math, but I was like the lowest of top set math. You get what I mean? Like middle set was a bit too advanced for me. I was better than everyone in middle set, but I was not better than anyone in top set. You get what I'm saying? And I was actually pretty decent at like math and English, but it just took me a lot harder to get things. And like, that's okay. That's okay. Like, that was my learning style. I needed things repeated a bit more. I just needed that bit more of that extra attention in order to get something. But once I got it, it's like that. And like, as I said, like, I was never like the top of the class. I was never that person who's like the smartest or like the brightest at all. But that's okay, because it's like, I shouldn't compare myself to anyone else. Like, I was good in myself. And something that kind of sucked as well, shout out to her though, is like my big sister was like so much more academically smarter than me. Like, she just got math and she just got English like that. And it's like in like year 6 and stuff, like she was getting like the equivalent of like A's and A stars, and I was getting like B's and C's at her age. And it's like from like a younger age, I was kind of like, why don't I grasp things like my sister does? Like, how come she gets it and I don't get it? And like, I hated feeling like that. And yeah, I hate feeling like that. And it was like when she was getting A's and A stars, I was getting B's and C's. Even though I'd worked 110,000% revised and everything like that, I was getting like B's and C's. And like, I remember, I'll give you guys a first-hand story about this. I remember we had our SATs exams in year 6, and SATs is like the equivalent of like, you're about to finish primary school, you're going to secondary school, you just need to make sure that you remembered or everything like that. So it wasn't really like a big, huge exam deal, but it felt like it when you were like 11 years old. And I remember doing my SATs exams, and like, that was my goal. I was like, I'm going to get 1A. That was the goal that I revised. I worked, I pushed myself, I'm going to get 1A. And I came back and I got B's and C's. And actually, I didn't do bad, but I remember I got that result paper. I was crying. Tears, shambles, and I was literally like 11. I remember walking home, that's when I was walking home by myself. I was walking home for like 15 minutes. Tears, crying, because I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like the biggest failure ever, because I was like, I've let down. I was like, my parents have come all the way from Tanzania just for me to fail. It felt like a failure. I felt like BNCs is actually like, people were celebrating that they had literally just passed, and I was saying like, I feel like my parents have come all the way from Tanzania and I've failed. I've let down my grandparents. I've let down my whole entire family tree. And it's not until revisiting this video and like researching this video, I forgot how from such a young age, because of like education and because of how big it was, if I didn't do well, I took that personally. I felt like a failure if I didn't do well academically. And it's like, I think back at that time, I'm like, I wish when it came to home learning and I wish when it came to education, I was motivated and given words of affirmation that you are doing your best and you are a hard worker and you got this. But instead it was kind of deep rooted in fear. It's like, hey, there's no other option but to succeed. There's no other option but to succeed. And I was like, but I'm not succeeding right now, so I'm a failure. That's how I felt. And I felt like that at like age 11, 7, 8. Young age. So going back to this point on like tough love parenting, I completely understand being tough love. I completely understand being brutally honest. I completely understand that. But it gets to a point with tough love where it's like, where is the love? Truth be told, where is the love? You look at someone like Michael Jackson and his father, it's like, where was the love? They never bonded. They never had a relationship. They never went to the park together, never went to the cinema together. They didn't click. They didn't see each other in like a human to human, like father-son way. They never had, even though Michael Jackson was so successful, huge, big name, yeah, I'm sure his father was also had like his own money as well. Even though they saw so much success, they weren't bonded. They weren't together. So it raises this question when it comes to parenting, when it comes to raising kids and raising hard workers, you need to motivate them. You need to be the kind of person where it's like, if they make a mistake, if they mess up, they come to you. They don't run away from you. They come to you. You know. That was a very deep discussion. I know. I'm proud of us for getting through that. That was a very deep, very deep. For this next section of this video, I'm going to talk about teenagehood and like early teenagehood and seeing racial imbalance for the first time. I'm going to tell you guys this. This is a personal story. No, I burped. Sorry. First time that I saw racial imbalance was when I was in like year 5 and year 6. And that was when, how old are you then? You're like 9, 10, I think. And I think the first time that I proper saw racial imbalance was when I got into school and I was like 12, 13. And let me tell you this. Time to ruffle some feathers. Some of my white peers and so many like white students who I'd known in school or outside of school, they were able to get away with so much. So flipping much. From like a young age, because like 13 and 12, that's pretty young. I was like, if I said this, if I did this, if I acted this way, if all the other black boys were acting like the way some of the white boys were acting, the difference would have been night and day, quite literally. Being a teenager is quite literally, it's mad. It is mad. It's like your brain, your hormones, your emotions are literally all over the place. And like there's so much like anger that comes out, like jealousy comes out, like just so many like secret hidden emotions that you thought like you've had before, they all of a sudden like just become so much more visible. And I remember like, I think like because anger is like a normal emotion. Anger is something that just kind of brewed in like the back of like my emotional space. And I feel like it really manifested and came out when I was like 17, 18 years old. I will not go into that right now. Maybe one day. And one thing that's like, even though it's very messy, very common in school, and it's like, it's normal. It's like school fights, beefs, dramas, all of that stuff. And it's like, I never personally got into any school fights because I didn't get into beef with anyone. I just kept myself on a little limb. I'm not trying to fight people. Truth be told, I'm not trying to fight people at all. I feel like something that I was very angry about was that when there's like a group of like white teenage boys and like a group of black teenage boys, the reception is different because, as I said, school fights and stuff like that is very normal and very common. Doesn't mean that's right, but it's just very normal and common. So it's like if a group of like white boys kind of got into a fight, it's kind of like, oh, boys will be boys, you know, that's how teenage boys are, like that's just, you know, boys are just rough and stuff. A group of black boys are automatically seen as a group of black men fighting. They're seen as men fighting, and like the repercussions and like the effects of that are just much more severe in comparison to white peers. And I feel like so many of like white people who I knew who got into so much trouble and they got into like they did every single thing bad. They were in isolation all the time, getting into fights over all the time. They were bullies all the time. They got so much grace from teachers. They got so much grace from like their parents, because I feel like there were so many people who I feel like they got soft spots from like teachers. Like they was like, oh, like, you know, this little Sammy boy, like, you know, things are going on at home, you know, that's why he's so rough and stuff. But, you know, that's teenagers for you. Like, they're going to get something at, you know. But let it be a black boy that's fighting every single weekend. Like, they'll just be like, okay, this one, we're kicking out the school. You are destroying the school's representation. You are everything wrong in the world. Pack your bags and leave. And, like, I've seen that. I actually generally seen that in real time, in real life. In this section of this video, I'm kind of going to talk a bit more about me personally, because I just remember being a teenager, like in the back of my hand. But I haven't forgotten about black women. Promise you that. Black girls, I did my research. Next section of this video, I got y'all, okay? I'll never forget this day. I feel like it's the first day where I was actually racially profiled. Like, I genuinely remember, I've been racially profiled before, But this one was like, okay, this is bang in my face right now. I remember when I was 14. Oh gosh, this day could have happened like yesterday, the way I remember it. I was about 13 or 14 at the time, and I was walking to the barber shop. I think I probably need to walk back again. Oh no, it's not too bad. Hey. I was walking to the barber shop on a Saturday, and I remember I was wearing a tracksuit. Oh yeah, I was experimenting with my style a bit more. I was wearing a tracksuit bottoms. I used to wear like jeans and a shirt all the time. That's how I just wore whatever my mom told me to wear. But now I was like, Mom, I got this. I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna walk around with tracksuits now. That was the tracksuits weren't even. I didn't even look nice in them. But anyways. So I was walking to the barber shop with my hair, which was pretty long. I had my tracksuit on. And then this white guy, I'm going to say that he was like 17, 16, maybe 18 to stretch. But he was literally a bit older than me, I could tell. And he's like, yo, you sell weed? You sell weed? You sell weed? I was like, no. And he's like, oh, okay. And then like there was like a big old group of people because it was busy in town that day. And like he came to me and then went his way. Like he didn't ask any single person. And then I kept walking. I was like, why did he ask me? Okay, that's why. And from the time it took me to walk to the barbershop, to walk back home, at the barbershop, that was the only thing that I was thinking about. And what makes me like mad about that situation was when I told a trusted adult about that situation, I described every single thing the same way I just described it to you. They were like, oh yeah, it's because of your outfit. Oh, it's because of your hair. And I was just like, why did no one like listen to me, you know, thinking back at that time? And also as well, when I was 14, this is what I looked like when I was 14. Does this look like your dealer to you? I look back at pictures of me when I was 14. I don't know, I was a bit chubbier then. I look like a bunny or something like that. I literally look like so harmless. I look like a fairy or something like that. I don't think I actually said anything back because I think I was just a bit too stunned to speak. I remember like going up to my room and I was like, okay, so if I have to avoid like being racially profiled, like if I go to like the barber shop, if I walk around in town, I need to wear like a 3-piece suit or something like that to avoid being racially profiled. And one thing that I've learned is like, it doesn't matter your appearance, it doesn't matter your accent. You can be black and be married to a white person. It doesn't matter what you do. As long as you're black, doesn't matter what you're wearing. You can be a CEO, you can be a lawyer, you can be the bottom of the barrel. You can still get racially profiled. You can't run away from your blackness. You can't hide from your blackness. Something that's very interesting about racial profilation is that we can actually, as a black community, we can racially profile black people in general, black young people in general as well. It's very interesting that I was told that someone asked me if I sell or smoke weed because my hair was long. And it's okay, my hair it's never been long. It's always like this. I've never had like long hair in general. But I think about how in our black community, we actually shun down people in general, especially young people who like to experiment with like locks, especially young black boys as well. Young black boys who wear like locks and twists. We racially profile them. As I said, like being a teenager, like you're experimenting with lots of different styles, different music. I feel like for me, when I think about being a teenager, I had like 10,000 split personalities. Like it's like, okay, today I think I had a 1-day rock emo phase. Like I know my family don't even remember that because it didn't last long. Like I was listening to like Young Blood and rock music. Shout out to Young Blood though, because he seems like a nice guy. And like I was like, oh yeah, I'm emo today, but it lasted 1 day. I might need to bring it back. I might need to bring back my emo phase. And this is like a whole discussion in itself, like the demonization of locks in like the black community and in society as well. For me, I've always preferred having short hair. Like that's just been me in general. Look at all my videos, I've had short hair. I don't really want to grow out my hair. I just like it like this. But let's say I was like, okay, I'm gonna grow out my hair. I'm gonna do locks, I'm gonna do mini twists, I'm gonna do braids, I'm gonna do cornrows. It could be people in our community, could be like elders who'll be like, hey, like what happened to Roger? Like has Roger joined like a gang or something like that? And it's like, why do we demonize locks? Why do you demonize long hair on boys so much? And that can even be seen like the exact same thing for girls as well. Why do we demonize so many girls and black girls who literally like experiment with like their hairstyle, experiment like with makeup, experiment with like because being a teenager is literally a time of experimentation. Yeah, you look back at things like, oh gosh, like I look a bit crazy, but it's like when you're 14, it's like it's not even that deep. It doesn't mean I'm going to be like this for like a long period of time, you know. I need to start therapy again, I think. I remember that in our first section of the video I talked about how like in like childhood, mistakes are really shunned in like the black community. I feel like it's what that really transcends into like teenagehood as well, because being a teenager is about literally making mistakes. There's lots of things where I was like angry, I was a bit aggressive, and I'm like, well, I look back, I'm like, hey, Roderick, like, what were we doing? But I've given myself grace because I was actually 14 and my hormones were all over the place. So yeah, that excuse can happen when you're a teenager. When you're an adult, it's like, hey, you need to watch it. But when you're 14, 13, it's like, you can kind of forgive yourself. And I think a good discussion that we can have is that when teenagers go through like a pubescent stage, lots of parents need to be way more patient, I think. I wish we had more patience in our community. Just a bit more patient and a bit more understanding, and just kind of trying to understand, okay, what's going on in your mind? What's going on in your brain? Because I feel like that just will make that makes the pubescent time period just much more comfortable, you know. Because I feel like the most alarming things about like my teenagehood years was like I experimented. I started wearing a bit more tracksuits. I became a bit more antisocial, a bit more angry, a bit more like emotional as well. I can't lie as well. And it's like sometimes I feel like not many people knew how to deal with that. It was kind of like, okay, Roger, like what on earth are you, like, are you okay? Like, what is going on here? But it's like deep down, I just wanted to be listened to a bit more, heard as well. Yeah, that's it. Just listen to and heard. That's what I wanted from those teenage years. Okay. The hat is back on. It is time to have the discussion that no one in our community wants to have right now. Gay people, black gay people, yeah? No one wants to have this words. No one wants to have this discussion right now, but we're going to have it right here. Right now. June 2020 was such a pivotal moment in literal history because everyone was talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and everyone was raising awareness on so many black issues within our community that we are facing systematically and internally as well. There's something that I'll never forget. I remember in 2020, someone made a post on Instagram and like the picture was Black Lives Matter and then the caption was the most beautiful thing that I've ever read in my life. And then I went to repost it on my story. And because of how much I've been seeing Black Lives Matter on my screen, I didn't even notice that it said Black Trans Lives Matter. And I posted it on my story, then I saw, it said Black Trans Lives Matter, and I went back and I deleted it immediately. I'm exposing myself here, okay? I've learned and I've grown and I've matured from that time. I was 16, I'm now 20. And truth be told, I was like, why is this, I'm going to say that's how I thought when I was 16. I was like, why are they bringing this gay stuff into Black Lives Matter? Why are they bringing this gay stuff into a serious matter of discussion? I was 16. Don't come at me.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And looking back at it, that was such a huge wake-up call for me, and I'm so glad that that happened to me when I was 16, because it made me actually realise the level of privilege that I have within the black community. What I mean by that is, when it comes to like addressing societal black issues, the world listens to black straight men first. And then everyone else who doesn't fall underneath that umbrella has a harder time getting their voices heard. And like for me, when I was 16, when I heard the term Black Lives Matter, I thought like that term was just so clear, definitive and inclusive. So when I was going online and seeing people posting things like Black Trans Lives Matter, Black Gay Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter, I was so confused as to why everyone was trying to make it like a bigger limbo than it actually was. I just thought that Black Lives Matter was just so clear and definitive. This subsection of this video is going to it's going to be a little bit heavy. Like this whole video hasn't been heavy, but it's going to ruffle a whole lot of feathers because we're going to talk about the quote-unquote masculinity crisis. Lots of people think with like as the LGBT community rises, as like gender roles are kind of blurring right now, that masculinity is in crisis. And who's being affected by this the most in society? Young boys, young black boys in general. Okay, so let's actually define the term masculinity. So according to Google, masculinity is defined as qualities or attributes regarded as characteristics for men or boys. I took this a further step and actually searched what are masculine traits, what are the qualities of masculinity. And some of the top results that came up were a man that leads his family, courage, resilience, assertiveness, independence, leadership, confidence. And something that's very, very interesting about this is one of the qualities of masculinity is abuse. Abuse comes up, dominance comes up, competitive comes up as well. And I think that's very interesting that that came up. As I said right in the beginning of this video, we are a community that is heavily in favour of gender roles, as in it's man, masculine, women, feminine. So when so many people like in our community see like the LGBT community, it's one of those ones where it's like the most visible opposite of gender roles. As in, it's like, how is it? It's meant to be like masculine, feminine. How, like, that's out of balance when there's like two men together or two women together. And for me personally, I think that it's absolutely fine to not agree with every single value that like the LGBT community like offers. If you want to pin it to the book, if you want to pin it to the Bible, if you want to pin it to like human nature, men and women are the only two beings that can procreate. Men and women are like ordained to be together, and like, yeah, to the book, to the Bible, to the Torah, to the Quran, whatever religious book that you hold beliefs to, there is no like mainstream religion that is like highly in favor of like LGBT marriage, for example. So for me, it's like, if you don't agree on like the LGBT lifestyle or like, you know, pro like gay marriage and stuff like that, I completely think that that's okay. That's your religious beliefs, and I don't believe that you don't have to be allies or allyship to every single thing in the world. However, I really don't think that people should spread homophobia or to be homophobic and harmful to people who are like identifying the LGBT community. What I just told you guys about how people were like, okay, I don't agree with this lifestyle because of my religious beliefs. That's not a homophobic comment. That's just your personal beliefs and your personal values. But if you were to see like a gay couple on the street, you start harassing them, you start making their lives hell, you start beating them up, throwing stuff, that's something that I don't agree with, because it's just not necessary at all. I'm going to ask you guys some very tough, deep questions, and I want you guys to respond in your heads, not in the comment section down below, but think of men in your life, right? Whether that be like your friends, your family, like within like your family tree dynamic, just think of men, but to make sure that they're in your life and they're not celebrities. Can you think of a man who is abusive, so that it could be a man that has committed DV? Can you think of a man who is an alcoholic or a drug misuser? Can you think of a man who has cheated on their partner, cheated on like a marriage situation? Can you think of a man who is overtly controlling and way too microanalyzing, specifically to women and children? And can you think of a man who is overtly sexual? Now, all of those questions I've asked you guys, it should be for men in your vicinity, in your life. Now think of a man who is in your life who is gay. And there's a reason why I asked you guys that. Mind you, I don't have like any zero like proof or science of this, but I'm like 99.9, you know, I'm 100% sure that you guys could have thought of more names for the first 5 questions in comparison to that last question. Because I can think of more names on this side than on this side, in my real time and in my real life. Lots of people think that like masculinity is in like a huge crisis right now. Lots of young boys are going to be growing up and like be so confused because they're going to turn on the TV and they're going to see like a man in a dress, and that's going to put thoughts in their mind that shouldn't be there. And lots of people think that because of how mainstream like the LGBT community has become, that is what's having like the most effect on children right now. And specifically like young black boys young boys in general are being affected by like this rise of like feminine men or like queer media that's telling guys like, okay, it's okay for like two men to be together, it's okay for men to like wear dresses and stuff like that. But according to our metrics, according to like the questions that I've just asked you guys, isn't it in real time and in real life, more children in general are more likely to be influenced by people like this in comparison to people like this? I completely understand religious beliefs and I completely understand following beliefs like intrinsically from God, but I can't help but to call out hypocrisy at the exact same time. And I feel like there's so many hypocrites in religious communities. We're in this era right now where so many people, like, so many sinful things are becoming normal right now. According to our metrics and according to the questions that I've just asked you guys, I was able to think of so many names. When I've done that myself, I thought of so many names of so many people. According to our own metrics, haven't we already made so many sinful things normal? Ouch! Ooh! I wanted to find a term called toxic masculinity, and I know all of you guys have heard of this. Toxic masculinity is defined as a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with or expected of men regarding as having an... Why is this so hard to read? I'm going to put a better definition right here. I don't know, was that just me or was like that was just not making any sense like whatsoever? But anyways, I digress. Again, I did a quick little search to find out what are the qualities of toxic masculinity. And some of the biggest signs of toxic masculinity are aggression, dominance, violence, suppressing emotion, controlling others, as well as like glorifying violence as well. For me personally, I'm someone who cares about the well-being of children every single day, 24/7, 7 days a week. And I feel like so many people like mask their homophobia or like justify their homophobia in the name of protecting children. And I feel like, here's the thing, lots of people care about the protection of children in a very conditional manner. The reason why I asked you guys if you know any men who have committed DV, if you know any men who are alcohol and drug misusers, cheaters, controlling or overtly sexual, I know my audience, you guys we're grown. So if you guys as grown people can fill in the blanks for those questions, children can do that exact same thing as well. And I feel like, for me, there's more children who have been affected by these kinds of men specifically, because I'm going to call out toxic masculine culture, than these men, in my opinion. And for me, it's like, if you care about the well-being of children, if you care about keeping religion intact, you have to call out all of these bad traits and bad behaviors as well. Okay, here's the thing. When it comes to like the popularization of like the LGBT community and the effects that it has on children, there are two ways it can affect children. I think number one is from like media and number two is from school. And there's a small percentage of people who have got like same-sex parents, so it's like they're basically born into that world. And for me, like when it comes to media, when it comes to like kids cartoons, I don't necessarily think that they need to have characters who are like transgender or need to have characters who talk about like gender and pronoun stuff like that, because that's not necessary for like a kid's discussion or for like a kid's show. I can agree with that. And for me, like if you're a parent and you're like watching like cartoons with like your child and you see there's like LGBT themed and like LGBT like plots and characters, you as a parent, you have every right to like switch the TV or like to turn off the TV. If you're a parent and you're on Facebook and you see, oh, in like a local library to me, like drag queen story hours taking place, you as a parent have every right to say, no, hell no, I'm not sending my child there. I'm not allowing my child to go anywhere near there. But here's one thing you can't just turn off in like the click of a button. Alcoholic parents, drug misusers, DV in the households. And let me tell you this is such a deep point, but it's a point that I have to make in the discussion. There are more kids who are growing up asking themselves, why is there DV going on in my home? Then why is there a rainbow flag, like, you know, by Asda or something like that? I promise you this, a rainbow flag, a gay character on a TV show is not having the same amount of effect as a child witnessing or growing up and seeing like the most horrific things. And when it comes to so many like horrific things of like dominance and violence, to call it a spade, that perpetrates and comes from men more than women. I know things can happen with women, I'm not dismissing that. It's going to be higher for men. And to bring like this whole point like back to like the point of this whole video and this whole section, is like so many people are like, oh, we need to make boys boys again, we need to make men men again. I feel like the popularization of like the LGBT community has been something that's been around for like the last like 50 years or so. But I think it's really started to see like popularity and like social acceptance mainly in like the 21st century. So like the social relevance and like the social norm of like the LGBT community is something, even though it's been so mainstream and it's so mainstream right now, it's relatively something very, very new. However, all of these horrible, horrific things are something that is not new at all. So when I hear this like discussion where people are like, make men men again, make boys boys again, what time period are we actually referring to? Like what time period are we actually referring to? Because so many horrible, unmasculine traits have been going on and have been so like normal and like a social norm for such a long period of time that I'm not really too like, as I said, I'm not sure what time period are you guys talking about? Which one? So what does all of this have to do with the reason why I called you guys to this video, the adultification of black youth? There's so many black parents, or just parents in general, where their biggest fear is their son or child turning out gay. Even, you know, there's like playground, secondary school discussions like, oh, gay son or daughter. It kind of sets that default, like the worst thing that can happen to your son is if they turn out a little bit fruity. Don't know why I said like that, and I'm not re-recording this bit.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
One person who's taken this really too far is a rapper by the name of Boozy. I've actually spoken about him in this channel before, but I'm going to bring it back because this discussion is very sick. Boozy Badass is that, yeah, that's his name. Boozy Badass is a rapper who actually paid for oral for his 12-year-old son and nephews when they entered teenagehood. He paid a grown-ass woman to perform oral for his child, his son and nephew. Like, how sick and how gross is that?
I'm training them boys right. They were 12, 13, they got hit. Yes, a grown woman. Grown, super grown. Super grown.
And his argument is like, I'm raising my boys right, like they're not gonna be with none of that gay shit. Like they're gonna be straight, they're gonna be real men. So like, and I think like that's just so crazy, like to infatuate so much on like your child's sexuality that you've hired a literal grown ass woman to do some disgusting things to your child. Like that's just so, that's predatorial, and it's just so creepy and so weird to me. And lots of people are like, yeah, this is real masculinity, this is like a real dad, I wish Boozy was my dad. That's weird. That's so strange to me. Like even to have like sex conversations with my parents, like I think that's just awkward in itself. So it's like, if like, oh gosh, imagine like, yeah, like if your dad was like hiring strippers for you, like that's so gross, that's so weird. Okay, centering this video back to this topic of black queer youth, one thing that I've really learned is that even if I'm not a part of a community, those issues can actually still affect me. Hear me out. We're kind of in like an era in the world where people like, there's straight people and there's LGBT people. Straight people think this way, LGBT people think this way. And in a sense, I get that, but there's lots of times where lots of things mix. It's kind of like a Venn diagram, right? There could be straight people like, oh, no, I'm not part of the LGBT community, I don't want to hear it. But then all of a sudden, like their daughter tells them that they're lesbian. You know, their uncle comes out as gay. Their son comes out as bisexual or something like that. And it's like now all of a sudden, your opinions and your words and your opinions on like the LGBT community becomes so relevant because now you're intertwined in that community. Even if you're not a part of it, now you are in a sense a part of it. If that makes sense. I feel like I didn't explain that well, but I know you get it because you're smart. And one thing that deeply troubles me is that the rates in which black LGBT people take their lives away themselves is way more higher in comparison to non-black LGBT people. In regards to like the LGBT community, I've heard every single opinion from here to there. And one thing that I really don't like on like the extreme ends is how so many people justify like harm. So many people are like, oh yeah, if my son turns out gay, I'm beating him up. And it's like, okay, riddle me this. Your son comes out as gay, your nephew comes out as gay, you beat them up, what does that do? Like, what does that do? So are they straight now? Are they like saved again? Or you kick them out of the house? What does that actually do? And one thing that it really drives lots of black people to unalive themselves is because of the unacceptance from like their parents, from their families, from their communities. One thing that's like a walking contradiction is like their child could come out as like LGBTQ defining, and then like they get beat, they get punched, they get beat up by like their parents, from like their families, from their community, and then they take their life away. And then now everyone's sad. Oh, they could have come to us. Really? Like, I feel like it's one thing to like not agree with something, okay, but you have to be mature enough to actually listen, to actually have a conversation about it. Why do we have to lash and get to violence? Why is violence like now an option of discussion? And to close with the section, I'm going to ask you guys a very hard-hitting question. What is worse, a gay child or a dead child? The answer is yours. The answer is yours. I like to think that all of us would go with the first option. And to prevent the second option happening, we can't resort to violence as soon as we see like an LGBT person. We can't resort to like, oh, let's go beat them up, let's kick them out of the house, because that's going to lead you to that. Don't bury your child because of your ignorance, because of your prejudice, because of your hatred. Don't be your child's first bully. Okay, here's the thing. Bullies is something that so many people have to endure and go through, whether that be through school, be with friendships and stuff like that. One thing about bullying, that kind of like the silver like lining I say, is that it can come to an end because you maybe can transfer them outside of school, you can move house, whatever. The bullying that you can get from like your parents, from your family, from your communities, that's something that you can't just leave from, you can't just run away from. Like, that is generally not easy. So bullying from like your parents and from your family, that is the driving force as to why so many people in general take their own lives. And I believe that we all have a duty to making sure that that doesn't happen. You can disagree with something, you can disagree with gay marriage, you can disagree with pride, that's completely fine. Let's keep kids alive. Let's keep black kids alive, okay? Now for this section of this video, I want to talk about how the effects of the adultification of black youth how that transcends into adulthood life as well. Guys, in the span of what feels like, hey, probably like an hour, we have trauma dumped and spoken about so many incredibly deep topics of discussions. And you know something that's so crazy? There's so many things that we haven't spoken about. So with that in mind, there's so many black people just in general in their adulthood life who are carrying so much baggage from like early upbringing, early childhood, and they're just walking around and not telling anyone about all of this stuff. For black people, it's just so much harder for us to A, find resources, and for B, to actually make that initial first step to say, you know what, I need help, I actually need to go to therapy, or I actually need some sort of like medical assistance for my mental well-being. And I'm in a very interesting position in my life where I'll tell you this, I'm 20 years old right now, and even though I'm like classified as an adult, I'm not your uncle, I'm not a father, so I'm not like adult, senior, elder, but I'm also very much so like not a teenager right now. So I'm just kind of like just floating around and like hearing and absorbing like the information of like the best of both worlds. And something that I really like about my new chapter, my age right now, is that I feel like I'm starting to see people who are older than me, as in like people like 20 plus years older than me, as human beings rather than people who are older than me. What I mean by that is like when you're like a child, of course, when you see like your parents, when you see like your aunties, your uncles, your grandparents, they're like older authoritative figures. You don't see them on like a bad day. Well, some parents are different, some family members are different. You don't see them on a bad day. You don't see the things that they've gone through. You don't see like their hardships. But when I'm getting older, I'm actually seeing, raw, like there's actually so many things that like people older than me were going through that I had literally no idea that was happening in like their adult life or in their childhood, because they just kept it hidden. And I'm actually blessed, I've actually got like a good rapport and relationship with lots of like aunties and uncles. Not everyone, of course, but I actually like the fact that I can actually speak to them like without the fit. You know, like when you talk to like your aunties and like your uncles when you're growing up, it's like, hi auntie, yes uncle, yes auntie. It's a bit more like formal. But now I kind of get to speak to lots of them like on like a human to human level, and to get to have much more like deeper connective talks. One thing that's very apparent in our community is I feel like there are lots of people who like pride themselves on like, I've gone through so much, but like I'm still here, I'm still standing, and God's got me. And as much as I do believe that is the case, I feel like there's so many people who carry like the strong trope in like our community. It's like, yeah, well, I went through all of this, and like it didn't break me, it redefined me. It made me the person that I am right now. And I know that trauma can like redefine you, and even though it's like very horrible things that lots of people go through, it does give them that element of strength. Just because you can think positively about the outcome doesn't mean that it can't hurt at the exact same time as well. To coin this discussion a bit more to me, I've grown up and seen so many like strong people. And here's the thing about being like calling someone strong. It doesn't sound bad, right? If someone called me strong, you're not gonna take it as like, oh, that's an insult, because it's not an insult. But it's something that it's got layers, especially in like the black community, especially if it's to a black woman specifically as well. Quick little search, strong has connotations of like tough, sturdy, hardness, proud, confident, arrogant, egotistical. And to put it quite bluntly, lots of those attributes are associated with masculinity. And one thing that's an unfortunate truth is like an interesting, deep-rooted discussion of like the masculization of black women. You know, you think of like an issue or something that happened like 10, 15 years ago, and it's like, even though it was like very minuscule, like you just remember it like 10 plus years later. So this exact same thing happened to me like the other day when I was planning this video. I remember in year 7, you're like 12, 13 or something like that. A bunch of us were going out, and in the UK in the winter time it gets pitch black at like 4 p.m. And I remember going to go out somewhere at like 5 p.m, 6 p.m, which isn't late of course, but it was going to be pitch black. I remember it was like lunchtime or something like that, and we were all planning our routes, we were all planning how we were going to get there. And then there was there were two white girls who were going to take the bus to said place. And like they were like, oh crap, you know, like taking the bus and it's going to be like 6 p.m, it was going to be pitch black, and like we're two girls, like that's not some, and because we had to take the bus and like walk somewhere far. Like they were like, we don't want to walk all this route by ourselves as two girls in the pitch black, which I completely understand. But then they redone the route and they're like, oh crap, said insert black girl name was going to be on that exact same bus and was going to walk with them. They're like, oh, but never mind, it's okay because black girl was going to be there, so we're going to be okay. They felt like the element of relief because a black girl was going to be there. Not a black woman, not someone who is 10 plus years older than them, a black girl, exact same year. And that's when I was like 11 to 13 years old, so I didn't say anything, or I didn't think anything of that comment until planning this video. I was like, wait a second, why did they think, where did that come from, that like, we're going to be okay because a black girl was going to be there who was the exact same age range as them? Why? And the adultification of black girls is something that's so it's so deep rooted in like misogynoir and sexism. And as we've spoken about in this video heavily, how from like a young age, so many black girls are seen as like a higher standard in like the home life scenario. You need to be on top of things. You need to know about all of this stuff. You need to be like the protector and like mother of the house from like a very, very, very young age. I'm not even gonna lie, when you have so many like household responsibilities at like such a young age, or when like the world sees you as like older or something that you're not, it does build lots of tough, thick skin, unfortunately, for so many black girls. And from that example I've literally just given you guys right now, we adultify black girls within our community and outside of the community. So many people adultify black girls as well, see them as strong, see them as like masculine traits of like protector and like strong and tough. And that's something, that's a whole other deep discussion in itself, even in like the medical field. You know, lots of people, that's why so many people are like, we need to push for black doctors, we need to push for black female doctors. It's because even like the medical field, so many doctors, they give more attention to white women in comparison to black women. Look at pregnancies, look at the statistic, like the horrible statistics there. You know how earlier we spoke a lot about like the LGBT community and how lots of black people are like, oh, I'm straight, so it doesn't affect me at all. Well, what I'm about to talk about right now is very, very heavy, but it's also a very prevalent example of how black LGBT issues affect all of us, all black people. I'd like to raise awareness on a woman by the name of Dione Peacock. Dione Peacock was from Indiana in America, and she was 59 years old, and she was a biological woman, born and raised a woman, and unfortunately, her neighbor thought that she was a trans woman. She was a black woman, born and raised black woman, biological woman. Her neighbor thought that she was a trans woman due to the masculization of black women, and violently took her life.
But because the man in the apartment next to her, 67-year-old Tommy Wayne Earl, thought she was trans, he slit her throat because, as he told the police, she was, quote, a male acting like a woman, and that he'd do it again if he got the chance.
And as I've told you guys, I've heard so many black opinions on the LGBT community from here all the way to here. And one thing that I've heard is so many times from so many people on like the most extreme ends, black extreme ends, is like, you know, we need to kill all the gays, we need to kill the LGBT people. Yeah, I've heard it all. And for me, this was like an unfortunate, huge wake-up call as to how black LGBT issues can actually affect every single black person, doesn't matter what sexual orientation you identify with. Because Dione Peacock was not a transgender woman. She did not identify as a transgender woman. She was born and raised a woman. Someone thought that she was a transgender woman. And in our black community, there's so many people just fueled with so much like homophobia and like so much transphobia. And I just can't help but think it's not a nice thing to think about at all. How would those very homophobic people, how would they have reacted if like their mother, their auntie, their sister, their grandma was killed because someone thought that they were a transgender woman? This is why I think it's just so imperative to have so many of these discussions, because I feel like there's so much healing that needs to be done in our community. I feel like black mental health is just something that's so overlooked. I feel like we need way more black therapists, way more households actually being like safe spaces instead of being places of fear and adrenaline and just awful nastiness. Which is why like upholding like, oh, I'm a strong person, I've gone through this, but I'm a strong person, that can actually lead to so much like poor mental health. And I feel like I can give like a further like example of this. I remember, I'll never forget this. I was literally like, I don't even know how old I was. Maybe I was like 10, 9 or something like that. I'll never forget seeing, because from my eyes, when I was a kid, adults were like perfectly sane in my eyes. In my eyes, I thought they were sane, like they got everything together and like, you know, they were all living in harmony. I've later matured and see that that is not the case at all. And there was someone who I saw I always thought that she was like very strong and very with it and very together. And I'll never forget seeing her break down, because that minded me completely. Because I was like, how is she breaking down? Like, she's just like the strongest person that I know. And that was literally like, what in the heck? Because the reason for that breakdown, I'm not going to fully go into it, but it was over something that was very minuscule. And I was like, maybe, like now looking at it in my adult lens, it's like something must have been like triggering. Like there had to have been like unhealed trauma, because how could something like so small have caused such a huge reaction? And I just realized, wow, like so many people like in our community, like we see them and like they're strong, they're put together, they look presentable, but that doesn't automatically mean that they are. And on the flip side, when it comes to black men as well, lots of people hear, okay, men need to be strong, men need to be tough, and that doesn't sound like a bad thing. It doesn't sound like a bad thing. I feel like from like a young age, like in the black community, in like the home, we need to teach boys specifically about like regulating emotion and what to do in stressful situations. Because when you raise men who are like, okay, be strong, be tough, be men, you can get men who are like very like externally strong, very like physically strong, but when you try and have a mature conversation with them, you just cannot. You cannot have a mature conversation with them, because like the ego is just so high. The masculinity is just so high where it's just like, I don't even want to hear this. I don't even want to listen to this. We raise men who are just so like violent and vicious as well. And that needs to end. And I feel like when I say this, when people say this, it's like, oh, you're teaching your kids to be weak. You're teaching your kids to be feminine. No, that's not the case. Healthy masculinity and toxic masculinity is something that people need to know. There's a difference. There's a huge difference, right? Healthy masculine traits, I've just searched here: self-control, wisdom, patience, courage, honesty, kindness, gentleness, grit, adventure, and love. And I feel like just teaching your kids, teaching your boys to be like strong, tough, bottle up all your emotions, you're not going to get any of these healthy masculine traits. You're going to get toxic masculine traits. In our community, I want to see way more empathy, way more patience, way more understanding, and way more love, because our children deserve it, our teenagers deserve it, our adults deserve it, our elders deserve it. Everyone benefits from this. Everyone benefits from this. Now I'm an adult and I'm fully like immersing myself and entering like full-on proper adulthood life. One thing that I've actually learned is that you do need to be strong. You do need to have a backbone. Otherwise, people will take advantage of you. And one place where people can really take advantage of you is in the workplace. And let me tell you this. I don't know why, but I feel like it's something that's been like conditioned to me ever since I started working. I started working when I was 16 years old. And I just always felt like I couldn't... When I was 16 to 19, I was always like, I don't want to... Like, if my manager was being rude, if my manager was being offensive, I was like, I'm going to keep that quiet, because I don't want to be the person that like starts work drama or anything like that. And even something about me, I think maybe it's from like childhood, like that you need to work twice as hard, you need to work twice as hard. When I'm at work, I give it like my 110,000%. Even if I was like just working at like my cafe, I worked at a cafe, that was my first job. When I was working at a cafe, I was like, I'm going to give it 100%. I'm going to make sure that I'm on time. I'm going to make sure that I'm like doing like everything to the book right. And even when you can do everything to the book right, you still, so many times I still haven't gotten praise, I still haven't got accolades. And one thing that's been like frustrating about that is seeing like my white colleagues or seeing like my non-black colleagues doing the bare minimum and not getting like any sort of like repercussions. And it's like, if I didn't do the bare minimum, no, if I did the bare minimum, people would call me out on it in a heartbeat. And like the most frustrating thing about this is like, everyone gets mad, everyone gets angry, and like that's a very normal, natural human like emotion to have. The way that you handle your anger, that's one thing. Like you have to handle your anger. You need to keep that regulated, right? And it's like, whenever like a black person speaks out in like the workplace scenario, you're automatically seen as like the angry black person, the angry black man, the angry black woman. And I feel like that's just a bit more, it has way more vim for black women in comparison to black men. This video is titled The Adultification of Black Youth, a Crisis We Can't Ignore. It's a great title, isn't it? Even though I'm talking about like the black youth as like the premise of this video, the adultification of black people is seen so much in adulthood. For example, like a 40-year-old black woman will get a different treatment to a 40-year-old white woman. Even though they're in the exact same age range, the difference is night and day. I've been in workplace scenarios where I've been the youngest, or I've been one of the youngest, but I've been like the most mature. I've been like the most hardworking in like the whole bunch. And I'll never forget this. I remember one time I was working, giving it my all. Then I went to like, we have like a break room where like my colleagues were, and I saw like two girls were painting each other's nails. I was like, oh, okay, so I've been working. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit here and watch them paint their nails, because I actually really like the smell of nail polish as well, fun fact. And I was like, why should I give it my 100% all if they're not giving it their 100% all? Even one time I was working, and and then I came back to like the main area where all my colleagues were, and my manager and my colleague were talking about dildos and sex toys, and they were just sitting there just chilling. I was like, so why was I working? Why was I working? And they're here talking about, you know, shoving up there and stuff like that. I'm just like, wow, okay. And here's the thing about like adultification of like black people, is that it really does transcend into adulthood. In like the workplace scenario, like, I visibly see it like just so strong, where it's like we put so much like work and so much pressure on black people, and it's like the non-black people kind of get to like joke around, giddy a little bit like that, but then black people work, like we work so hard. It's like, if for me, even like in my adulthood life, it's like if like my manager tells me, oh Roderick, you're doing something wrong, or Roderick, can you like get up and work, like I take that a bit more personally, and like I start feeling bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna fire me, But for my non-black peers, I don't see that pressure in them. I really don't see that at all. And because of this, especially like deep-rooting like upbringing as well, so many black people are like overworkers and overachievers and perfectionists, and aiming high is very, very good. That's very, very good. But overworking and burning yourself out and striving for perfectionism can become very detrimental and very toxic. And unfortunate truth, when us black people speak out on lots of these things, especially in the workplace scenario, it's harder for us to be taken seriously. Much harder, especially for black women, and much harder in comparison to black men. I think that's all I have to say for this deep dive video. It has been a deep dive video, I know. We've spoken about lots of deep topics and discussions. And yeah, that is all I have to say. Thank you guys. So if you watch every single minute of this, guys, I appreciate you. I love you so flipping much. Thank you so much. I've hit 629 or 28 subscribers. That is nuts in itself, and I can't wait to keep growing this channel. So if you want more deep dives, way more like hour, I think this video's gonna be like an hour plus. Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, please be sure to give it a like, a thumbs up, a comment, subscribe, share. My socials in the description, and I can't wait to speak more. I'll see you guys soon. Peace and blessings. Goodbye.